Chapter 4. Nephrith, do not mourn if I am slain. Instead, entomb me like the fair ones of old. Not in a high ziggurat, but in a vault below flat ground, covered by sand, where no questing eye shall find my bones. Raise no stele, and carve no inscription, save one. In this tomb rests a true son of the Necrontyr, unmarked by its corruption, open and be damned. The War in Heaven, Act 3, Scene 2, Line 1. Solemnace was famous for its galleries, sweeping reconstructions of battles, titanic heroes preserved in hard-light recreations of history's greatest moments. Even before the Great Sleep, Trajan had entertained visitors from nearly every dynasty with his collection of wonders. What was less known was that it also contained one of the greatest documented collections in the galaxy. A rival even to the Eldari's fabled Black Library. Trajan, after all, had once been a chronicler and archivist. Though artifacts were his passion, he did not neglect the written word. It was not a project that required his close attention. He handled acquisitions, of course, for that was the most interesting part. But the rest he delegated to cryptex scribes who catalogued, cross-referenced, and digitized each work. Trajan hoped that in another 10 millennia, when the Necron legions were destined to awaken, all of their literature, history, and discourses would be accessible. A mnemonic copy sent to the library of each tomb world. A great work for the benefit of all. Trajan liked great works. Indeed, he had been awake far longer than even the handful of his early risen kin, and had learned quickly that lofty pursuits were an essential component to immortality. The Necron Overlord's greatest enemy was not the savage orcs, the grasping humans, or the cunning Eldari. Boredom was the greatest foe, one that must be continuously battled lest madness or despondency set in. So he had his gallery and his holographic archive ready to gift once his kin arose. And besides, if all the tomb worlds had their own archives, no researchers would come to muck about in his. Nobody touching his precious manuscripts or asking obnoxious questions. Trajan was not feeling charitable as he stalked down into the depths of Solemnace. Past his restoration rooms and extensive wine cellar, he approached the carved wooden doors of the library, warm and inviting, and threw them open with a shove that stressed the hinges. His fury, though terrible, was always brief. Trajan did not burn hot for long. His anger was cold and dry, like the desert night, a focused, lasting anger, both practical and useful. Shelves reached to the ceiling, rotating cradles like the side wheels of a great river barge. Held arcane tombs and scrolls, cryptex paused in their copying, stunned. "I require assistance," he said. Then solitude. "Of course, my lord," the chief librarian said. "Is this about the proposed expansion?" "The what?" The cryptex bowed, obsequious. "The stacks are full, my lord. We are over capacity. I have humbly suggested that we expand the collection into the space currently occupied by the wine cellars." "But then, where would you put my wine, librarian?" You do not drink wine, my lord." "Of course I don't," Trajan snapped. "It's far too valuable. Request denied. Enlist excavation wraiths to dig another chamber." My lord." and bring everything you have about the war in heaven, fair on Nephrith, and the Astrarium Mysterios. I want the physical manuscripts. Quite an eclectic subject, Lord Archivist. He called up a Fosglyph panel and ran a text scry. In addition to the larger works, there are many small references in various mediums that need special handling and transport. There are sheet gold scrolls, foundation steel, platinum slab tablets. Everything, Trazen said, in a tone that did not brook dissent. Bring it all, then go away. I'll be some time. Yes, sire. But first, bring me the legal code. The volumes on interdynastic theft and trials. Is there to be a trial, my lord? Oh, yes, said Trazen, fingering the ritual title he had ripped from Oricon's frame. There most certainly will be. Mandragora, Eastern Fringe, 9 standard years later. Mandragora the Golden, Mandragora of the Emerald Skies, Mandragora, dynastic seat of the mighty Sautek. Oricon despised it. Even now, even as he'd exited the Dolem Gate, even as he'd exited the Dolmen Gate of the scars of his perilous journey fresh on his necrodermis, he could not help but release his venom. Land of whisperers and sycophants. I should have stayed with the Drakari. Once the third most powerful dynasty in the Necron Empire, the crown world of the Sautek was a dead place. Great sand dunes drifted against its ziggurats and palaces, burying them beneath golden cascades that mocked its grand title. Windstorms scoured its monuments, with the planet's abrasive silica grains, dripping the gilded sepulchres and obelisks to their living metal interior, and giving the entire city, or what one could see of it, the appearance of brushed steel. A few districts retained their grandeur, sheltered in the lee of great stasis tombs, and spared the caustic attentions of the wind-blown sand. There, statues of ancient pharaohs still stared imperious over the desert, faces distinct and spared the weathering of less fortunate monuments. There, the few hundred awakened members of the Sautek dynasty lived a pantomime existence, accidental custodians of the silent necropolis, awakened 10,000 years too early, busying themselves taking care of a world that was largely self-sufficient, waiting for the distant day when the countless billions of sleepers would emerge. Oricon stayed well away from those districts. Before the Great Sleep, he'd found Mandragora oppressive. So many beings milling, clamouring, constantly interrupting, constant politics, petty creatures struggling for petty victories. It had been difficult to place focus. Even achieving a basic chronotrance required shutting the world out with slab-thick walls in his astromantic observatory. Perched on the humped mountains overlooking the city and above his sky-erasing glow. Yet maintaining a presence was necessary. Personal preferences aside, Mandragora was the Sautek power centre, and Oricon could not be a court astromancer from his hermitage on Rithcan. More's the pity. But Mandragora had much to recommend itself. In these strange days, a stable dolmen gate to access the webway, the quiet dark of a dead, sterile metropolis, and of course an automated defence grid that was the best in the Empire. Just the sort of things you need if you've stolen from one of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. Using the transdimensional beamer had been a desperate risk, little better than casting lots. He'd adjusted the translocation paths to his own specifications, of course. Oricon was reckless, not dull-witted. There had been a chance some infinitesimal variable would mar his transit. A chance that, instead of the glowing tunnels of the webway, he would have sprung back into reality in the heart of a star, or floating in deep space between dimensions. Even absent those extreme cases, there was every possibility he would come out at a random point in space-time, forced to adjust and use the beamer again and again, hoping the increasingly wild translations would bring him home, and not to realities increasingly aberrant from his own. That would not have been ideal, but also not a tragedy. After all, Orican had time, but his astromantic divinations proved true enough, and his translations landed him in a disused portion of the webway. Not the exact point he'd intended, unfortunately, but close enough. Then again, it was possible it was exactly the spot he'd meant, but that the network had changed into something unrecognizable. With the webway destabilized, it was increasingly difficult to tell. The Eldari's great cataclysm had rocked the network to its foundations, snapping away arcways that used to see fleets pass and flinging them into the immaterium. Unthings from that dimension of madness increasingly stalked the corridors, and every cycle the Eldari's witch-seers collapsed more pathways to keep the evils out. Orican had wound through the coils of the labyrinth dimension, clearing passages and lurking in shadows. What remained of the old enemy civilization was in flight. Neo-primitives like the ones Trazyn had pillaged migrating to new homeworlds, vicious raiders hunting their own, all societal bonds broken. Refugees, eyes hollow with fear, hurtling helter-skelter through the halls without regard for where they headed. Orican did not blame them. After all, what the young race birthed had shaken them so badly he'd needed a century of meditation to recover. And he'd merely glimpsed it via astral projection. The Eldari's time upon the stage was ending in an era of lamentation and horror. Fair comeuppance, he'd said upon witnessing his first group of refugees, for what your decadence has unleashed upon this galaxy. Slithering between the chaos, the doubling back, and hiding, turned a 1-month transit from Solemnace to Mandragora into a 9-year odyssey. 3 cycles alone had been spent burning his way through a wending corridor infested with carnivorous fungoid blooms. His carapace bore new scars, talismans of an unfortunate encounter with Drakari incubi, and his power plant needed a refurbishment. But mostly, he required time for meditation and study. Now, atop his astromancer's tower, he watched the stars, sensing gravity's pull on the transit of planets, its infinite algebraic possibility influencing even the smallest events in the galaxy. The astromancers of old, stupid and superstitious as they had been, had guessed at this connection. But their pathetic spirituality had little to do with the scientific precision Orican now used to chart the pull of gravity and flow of particles. The bending of space-time around sucking black holes, the chain of bizarre causality that could turn a breath on one continent into a typhoon on another. And those lines of power, light, energy and time tended to snare around certain objects, like the one that floated, slowly turning at the centre of the observation deck. Jade shadows underlit it from the suspensor field beneath, and phosglyph equations and grids written on the very air surrounded it in a cloud. Lines traced from each theorem to the multi-sided surface of the Astrarium Mysterios. Automatic calculators measured and remeasured each face, edge, and vertex. There were 8, 12, and 6 respectively. A perfect octahedron, which is puzzling, he said aloud to the Mysterios, because according to my engramic banks, you were a pyramid when I left Solemnos. He tried to review his mnemotic data. and pinpoint the exact moment of its transmutation, but it was useless. The mirrored geometry of the webway, especially since the cataclysm, fouled his recall systems into a dreamlike blur. You have undergone a transmutation. No surprise as that is your function, but exactly when did you change? He asked rhetorically. It was sometimes easier to think aloud, split his consciousness into a portion that stimulated questions and a portion that searched for possible answers. What was the catalyst for this transmutation? What was the method? Spectromantic analysis indicated a device composed of solid living metal, the same substance that made up the tower, his staff, Oricon's own necrodermis. There were also trace amounts of mercury and unknown crystals buried in its heart. Strange, not standard components in Necron technology. Little wonder Trazen, blind to the metaphysical and lacking imagination, labelled it a forgery. Even those initiated into the cryptech mysteries, if they lacked sufficient study and insight, would have thought the same. Oricon had possessed the mysterious for a decade, and he could still not ken the basics of its operation. Perhaps it was time-dependent, gradually opening as the eons ground on, ensuring that shorter-lived races would never access its secrets. Conversely, he mused, the answering part of his consciousness taking over, it is possible contact with the webway activated it, or that it lay inert until it passed through the Dolmen Gate. Such a security measure could keep it from being activated outside the control of its makers. The Amanos dynasty, dead gods cursed their lifeless atoms, had been renowned for their secrecy and paranoia. In moments of frustration, Oricon took pleasure in imagining the solar flare ionizing the neural matrices of the sleeping dynasty, shockwaves scrambling their tomb world's magnetic field and rendering all systems inert. Mass neural death in the span of a few minutes. Too bad they hadn't been awake to feel it. Over the past cycle, Oricon had bombarded the Mysterios with every energy wave he considered safe, spoken to it in hex decrypt, and even tried contacting any hidden consciousness through neural interface. He'd raised 12 cryptex in body only, mind still at rest, and installed them kneeling around the observation deck. He networked their blank minds with his to increase his analytic capacity and engrammatic storage, running theorems and suppositions until 2 of them overheated. Blue flames burst from their ocular sockets before they translated to the resurrection forge to be rebuilt. Nothing. He had called scarabs to clean up the ash piles when he noticed that one did not follow the swarm. One with a jewelled red backplate. What? He said, resisting the urge to cross it beneath his foot. The little drone knelt in a servile bow, shaking slightly in his presence, its carapace scissored open to reveal a message orbiculum. The cryophase projection juddered and flickered for a moment, resolving into the one being Oricon did not want to see. Master Oricon, seer of the Sautek, the one called Diviner, said the tall being, staring into his eyes as if he were standing in the room. I am Executioner Phileas, of the Triarch Praetorians, Herald of the Awakened Council. By order of the Council, you are to present yourself on Bakira with immediate haste to face accusations brought by Trazen, Overlord of Solemnis and Archivist of the Bastard, Oricon muttered, squealed to the Council, did you? Relating to alleged acts on Solemnis. This scarab is slaved to your neural signature and will alert the Council if it detects non-compliant travel. Failure to present yourself in original body, not a surrogate, will be punished by the cancellation of your resurrection protocols. Glory to the infinite empire. The image winked out, and Orican swore, for he was going on trial. Is he coming? The speaker, Lord Nemesis Zubakar, rested his hyperphased sword tipped down on the floor of the dais. With a hard twist, he sent it spinning like a top, the unbalanced energy blade making a sound like a faulty turbofan as it rotated in place. Each time he caught the hilt before it lost momentum and fell. Thwomp, 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 catch. Thwomp, 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 catch. A summons from the awakened council carries full force of the law, said Trazyn. Orican will come. And if he does not, Trazyn thought, he will cancel his reanimation protocol, and Executioner Phileas will hunt him down with that great execution scythe of hers, which was clearly the result she hoped for. She had been sharpening the great half-moon blade since they had convened, running a molecular smoother over the orbit of the power field, aligning the particles along the wicked edge. Nothing more dangerous than a bored killer. Do you agree? Zubakar asked the Ferrec to his left. I do, replied Ferrec Ossuaria, her voice icy. Furious as usual that a mere overlord was addressing her as an equal. I concur, said High Metallurgist Quelka, leaning forward from the platform's third throne. This body holds authority in these disputes. So says the law. Zubakar shrugged, spun the sword. Thwomp, 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 catch. Cease that, snapped Ossuaria, deigning to turn her head towards the Overlord. Her tile diadem veil clattering. It's interminable. You may be a Ferrec, Zubakar said, but you are Ferrec of the Ritak. I owe you no obedience. The two locked oculars. Trazyn had little doubt that they were trading insults through interstitial transfer. Please, my comrades, Quelka said. On this dais we are equals. It is the keystone of our great peace. Our body holds the Empire together. We owe allegiance not to each other, but to the oaths we have taken. The rivals broke eye contact, and, as one, looked at the cryptek. Not that you needed reminding, he said, shrinking back into his chair. Trazyn swallowed a smile. Quelka was right, of course. Not that it would help his cause. Even before biotransference, Necrontyr society had been conservative and hierarchical, and those instincts held sway even in these strange times. After the War in Heaven, when the Catan Starlords fought the Old Ones with the Necrons and their imprisoned metal army, the Necrons had seen their chance to avenge the deception of biotransference. Rising up, they slew their erstwhile gods, shattering them into pieces and sealing their shards, each still powerful enough to level cities in huge tesseract labyrinths. Yet destroying the Old Ones and the divine Catan, even the implacable Necrons had overtaxed themselves. It was clear the Eldari were the rising race, and would shape the galaxy's next epoch, but the Metal Dynasties knew that no era lasts forever, and they had the advantage of deathless sleep. Already Orican had foreseen the fall of the Eldari and the rise of mankind, all of Necron kind, sleeping 60 million years in stasis. The galaxy was a wild place, though. Even the genius of the crypteks had its limit. Occasional, faulty awakenings occurred, perhaps only affecting one sarcophagus or at other times the tomb of a whole phalanx. It was entirely random, part of no plan, affecting everyone from the lowliest warriors of foot to those pharaonic ranks like Ossuaria, who had awoken to find herself the only conscious being on her silent tomb world. Without the rigid class structure holding them in check, those awakened by fault fell to chaos. Some awakened whole Decurions without the aid of a cryptech, damaging the neural pathways of their fellows and turning them into automatons. Others took the opportunity to settle old scores, murdering rivals as they slumbered in their sarcophagi. It was the Triarch Praetorians, an order of cloistered warriors who had eschewed sleep to watch over the stasis tombs, who finally insisted on the council. They had given it Phileas as their executioner, and Trajan suspected their spy. The awakened council gave the Necrons a minimalist ad hoc government. They protected the sleepers under pain of death, and set strict limits on the number and type of artificial risings. With premature resurrection so often leading to damage, no Necron was to be animated except under circumstances of dire necessity. But in a society where feuds were commonplace, its greatest task was to settle disputes with tribunals like the one Oricon would in a bare moment be late to. Phileas tested the blade of her scythe on the edge of the metal thumb. Supercar spun the sword. Thwomp, thwomp, thwomp. Catch. One more time. Reality shrieked and tore, lighting the death masks of the council with balefire. A rough translation, the kind conducted in a hurry. I would prefer if we make this quick, said Oricon, green fire still licking at his body. Let me summarize, said the diviner. I am accused of stealing an object from Overlord Trajan and destroying old worthless clutter. Priceless antiquities, Trajan corrected, holding out his wooden cane as an exhibit. The inlaid wood was snapped in two, its splintered ends already decomposing from its time out of the stasis field. Priceless and worthless are the same thing, Oricon spat. And I remember a time when you were all too eager to give up that hobble stick. But if you must draw up a list, we shall discuss restitution. The relative worth of these objects, Quelka said, curbing Trajan's response, is not for you to decide, Oricon. If you admit to this theft and vandalism of a tomb world, it is a serious offence. Law prescribes banishment or death. A law created by this body, Oricon snapped. A body whose authority in this matter I do not recognize. Trajan smiled. Same old Oricon, hostile to any authority, no matter how powerful. He would fist-fight the sun if he thought it was telling him what to do. It is why Trajan had pursued this course. The diviner would build his own mausoleum, block by block. And why is that? Inquired Ossuaria. We have held these tribunals without challenge for centuries. Perhaps, said Oricon, but not with me. It is not a fair process. High Metallurgist Quelka, do you recall our dispute as young adepts? A long time ago, my colleague, he faltered. The stars have wheeled quite a bit since then. Ossuaria, Oricon snapped, already ignoring the High Metallurgist. My lovely Ferrac, I believe you still owe me a debt for divinatory services, a substantial, uncollected debt. After all, who else could have predicted your brother, the Pharaon, and his 7 heirs would be on that unfortunate day? Ossuaria stiffened. Zubakar leaned back. laughing and shaking his bulkhead-jawed head. Cunning Minix, you said they were all... Cunning Minix, you said they were lost in a void storm. And Lord Nemesaur Zubakar, Orican continued, pausing for each title. We've had no dealings, but the Mefrit are old enemies of the Sautek dynasty. I would not put it past you to continue that kin feud. I wouldn't either, Zubakar confessed, patting a hand on his blood-coloured chest armour. The Mefrit had never been shy about their viciousness. Come to your point, Trazen rumbled, darkly, then quieted as Executioner Phileas turned to him and placed a finger on her lipless mouth. In summation, Orican continued, no judgment you hand down will be free from the perception of bias, and given the size and stature of my dynasty, are you willing to risk the Pharaoh's displeasure when he wakes to find an unsanctioned council has executed his chief seer? Silence. The three figures sat statue still on their onyx thrones, symbols of power that felt shakier than they had a moment before. He would, no doubt, unleash the Stormlord. Orican let that hang, then turned to Quelka. High Metallurgist, you campaigned with Lord Imhotep on Calliope, did you not? Perhaps you could enlighten your fellow members. What do you call yourselves? Ah, yes, council members. About what happens when the Stormlord goes forth in his panoply of war. Again, silence. All knew what had happened to the Kuvu dynasty at Calliope. Even now, 60 million years and several celestial wars later, gone like the Kuvu was a regular idiom in Necrontyr speech. Back when their kind still ate, it was one that one said after clearing an entire plate. It would, began Quelka. It would be prudent to remove the appearance of bias. Perhaps we should suspend proceedings, said Oswaria. Only until a suitable representative for the Sautek has arisen to oversee the proceedings on behalf of the dynasty. It is what they would do for us, said Zubakar, aware that the transcription scarabs would record his words, but not his disbelieving tone. Will that serve you, Trazen of Nihilak? It damn well won't, Trazen shouted, dialing back his venom when Phileas raised up a hand. It damn won't, he repeated, until a Sautek representative awakens. It's not scheduled for another 10 millennia. And this jackal son, the defendant, can control the stasis crypts on Mandragora. The Pharaoh will awaken when he wills it. As the accusatory, I cannot accept this. Have you a solution, then? Orican asked. If this body is not willing to continue, then what else is there to do but suspend it and issue a continuance? Trazen paused, reviewing the volumes of Necrontyr lore he'd encoded in the last decade of study. He watched Orican smile, the diviner clearly misinterpreting his hesitation as a loss for words. Keep smiling, reactor leak, he thought. If this tribunal cannot hear the case, he said, as accusatory, I assert my right to a mediator. A what? A mediator, repeated Quelkar. Yes, indeed, that is the proper procedure. Is it? Zubakar narrowed his oculars. When the council formed, Trazen explained, you all voted that the legal codes of old held sway in all instances not covered by the new codes, and I assert my ancient rights to a mediator of overlord rank or above, one that has no ties to the Sautek or the Nihilak dynasties. The council members looked at Quelkar. It is proper, the cryptek said. It could be done. But where to find a mediator? Asked Ossuaria. Forgive me for interjecting, Ferrock, said Trazen. This is a council world. One of the dynastic representatives entombed below, and I'm sure the High Metallurgist could call upon his skills to raise one in safety, provided we came to an agreement on who to select. Trazen cast a glance at Oricon, scrying his demeanour. The Seer's Deathmask remained impassive. Trazen received a glyph message via interstitial link. Bastard. The selection process took 2 standard years of bickering, politicking, and the occasional threat of violence. It was, in other words, a standard Necron court case. It was no accident that all dispute resolutions were, by highly practical tradition, observed by an armed executioner. More than a few cases in the ancient records ended with the phrase, "Case dismissed after the accusatory's dismemberment." But finally, the council made their selection. It has been 60 million years, said Overlord Vosk, his orange oculars blinking with the haze of tomb sleep. He would remember soon that he no longer needed to blink. Indeed, Overlord, said Quelka, bending over the stasis sarcophagus, which was propped up at an angle. Its occupants still within. It would be best not to move your body overmuch, my lord. We have primarily awoken your neural matrices and vocal actuators. This will assist your re-entubement procedure afterwards. Why? We need you to adjudicate a case, my lord, the High Metallurgist explained. After all, you were chosen to be the Charnavok representative here, were you not? I have encoded the particulars of the accusatory's writ. Do you see them? Yes, the Overlord hissed, one slow hand gripping the narrow steel beard jutting from his chin and rubbing it between 2 fingers. Proceed. Trazen stood before the onyx dais, preparing his case. It was not exactly how he'd expected this to play out, but then again, trying a case a mere 12 years after an offence was almost scandalously fast by Necron standards. The sort of frontier justice portrayed in the theatrical dramas, not how things happened in reality. Trazen activated an orbiculum, casting projection of the Astrarium Mysterious in the centre of the chamber. It rotated in space, semi-translucent, surrounded by ocular captures of Oricon burglarizing. 12 standard years ago, Oricon, called the Diviner, seer of the Necron tier, feloniously entered the tomb world of Solemnis. In the attempt to steal this artifact, the Astrarium Mysterious, in his adult state, he believed it to be a prize worth destabilizing the peace for. I apprehended him, and in his escape, he destroyed a host of precious cultural objects recovered from home soil. Trazen swept his hand left and right, scrolling through cryosprays holograms of snapped canes, shattered vessels, a pipe with a broken stem. These objects? How did you obtain that? Pointed Zubakar. The pipe. Standard acquisition procedures, he evaded. All above board. Go back, said Zubakar. That pipe's Mefrit made. It should be in our gallery. My dear Overlord, said Trazen. Solemnis holds all of these objects in trust for the good of all our kind. Damn that! It has my family's sigil on it. If you make a formal request through the proper channels, we can certainly arrange its return, Trazen said. He, of course, made all decisions regarding the gallery, but had always found that "we" was a magical word for deflecting blame. But we firmly believe that those precious relics should be in a place where experts can ensure their proper preservation and display. This inquiry is not concerned with Overlord Trazen's acquisition processes. Cut in Overlord Vox. His vocal actuators now calibrated to cancel out the sleep slur. Trazen could see why the Overlord was known for his power as a magistrate. He had a fine orator's voice, with an undeniable sense of authority. You are in the right to protest the diviner's intrusion, as well as the vandalism. It is no small thing, but I see no reason to pursue death or banishment. Restitution can be made through the re-engramming of several thousand Sautek warriors and their transfer to your command, or the surrender of planetary tithes. Indeed, that may be too radical considering your dubious ownership. Given that, why have you escalated this petty dispute so high? Trazen reconjured the projection, settling it on the puzzle box. This is the Astrarium Mysterios, the object of Oricon's desire. A puzzle box? Asked Vox. A mere puzzle box, said Oricon before a glance from Vox hushed him. A map. An encrypted celestial chart, said Trazen. In certain esoteric corners of our society, an astrarium was used to reveal the location of occult gatherings or arcane pilgrimage sites. They can be activated by a spoken key phrase, or coordinates opening when they're at a specific point on the galactic plane. Each one is individual, and each becomes inert after its successful use. I believed this one to have been already used, or even a replica, but you no longer believe that. Oricon would not have been so rash if he thought it inert. Trazen stared at his rival, but instead of hatred, Oricon's hooded eye fixed on him with interest. He suspects that it leads to a fabulous treasure. And do you have any idea where it leads? Vox leaned slightly forward in his casket, propping himself up on an elbow. Quelka approached him, fussing, as he waved the high metallurgist away. Do not make us wait. According to the encoded glyphs on its surface, Trazen said, pausing to enhance the drama, the Astrarium Mysterios leads to the tomb of Nephrith the Untouched, the last natural pharaoh of the Amenos dynasty. There was a pause, then a barking laugh from Zubakar. Nephrith the Untouched, he mocked. From that god-awful long tragedy? Yes, said Trazen. Nephrith is primarily known as a character in a theatrical drama, The War in Heaven. But he did exist. Of course he existed, Ferric Ossoria sniped. It's a historical play, or history-inspired at least. But to suggest that any of it resembles what actually occurred... You remember, do you? Inquired Trazen. I mean, truly remember. Step forward if you recall the days before biotransference. Can anyone tell me with certainty that their mnemonics contain a perfect record with no deterioration during the eons of sleep? None stepped forward. The high metallurgist shifted uncomfortably. They all knew what biotransference had done to them. Mnemonics of the flesh times were like memories of an adult has of childhood. One knows that one was a child, that one was born and lived years, only through second-hand stories. Knows that there are friends, once close companions in youth, who are nothing but fleeting ghosts in memory. Sensations disconnected from contexts. Things retained, but with no memory of learning them. One knows the colour blue, but cannot recall the first time one knew its name. Indeed, it was the purpose of those mawkish stage dramas to reinforce Necron history, lest they forget. It was the reason why even oafs like Zubakar knew the characters and plots inside out, despite hating their length. They had to be clear, grow punishingly long. Now that actors could memorize thousands of pages via engrammic recall, and the audience had no biological needs to interrupt the performance, the forgotten cryptech playwrights who'd contributed to the drama had gone overboard. A full performance could take well over a decade. My research had concluded that the dramas may be more accurate than previously believed, said Trazen. He waved towards the orbiculum, summoning bas reliefs depicting the war in heaven, Necrontyr warriors and star chariots, worn free of detail by the antiquity of the carving, advanced on the Old One's doom engines. It appears that, indeed, Nephreth was called untouched, due to a genetic resistance to the radiation-induced cancers afflicting our former bodies. Further research suggests that his rebellion against the star gods, his doomed resistance to the process of biotransference, indeed occurred. Trazen looked at Oricon. The diviner stared intently at the holographic bas-relief, rubbing one of the strands of tiles that fell from his shoulders. One tile was still missing, the one Trazen had ripped from the diviner during the struggle on Solemnes. It hung at Trazen's hip now, amidst the Eldari gemstone and other curios that dangled there, a reminder of his revenge. But Trazen had difficulty reading the diviner's mood, apprehension perhaps, or merely interest. How much of this did he know? Here, drama and history diverges, Trazen said. In the drama, Nephreth was killed attacking the star gods, scorched to nothing by the Burning One. But my archive contains an account of Nephreth's own dynasty betraying him, murdering their pharaoh and his followers to broker peace with the star gods and gain the gift of biotransference. Quite an anticlimax, Vox muttered. Indeed, said Trazen, but his relatives in the Amunos dynasty, despite their betrayal, apparently wished to hedge their bets. After all, they possessed the only genetically uncorrupted sample of the Necrontyr species, free of disease and blight. Trazen swept the projection, calling up a manuscript illustration of a death procession carrying a stasis casket into a towering gateway. They hid the dead pharaoh in a stasis tomb complex called the Kephris, hoping to return and recreate the species if they found biotransference not to their liking. So why didn't they? Asked Vox. Return, I mean. Trazen shrugged, unclear. But just as we cannot remember Nephreth, his followers may have forgotten how to activate the device. Over time, they forgot even what it led to, thus his name. The Mysterios, a mystery. Fascinating, said Vox. What purpose do you have for keeping this object, Trazen? Trazen stopped. He wants it for his gallery, said Oricon, to stare at it, or rather, not to stare at it. He didn't even know what he had. It will simply collect dust, a curio serving no purpose. And what purpose would it serve you, Oricon? Asked Vox. None, growled Trazen. He doesn't believe in a return to the flesh. Oricon wants us to be... He waved his fingers in the air. Energy beings, things of light. If he found the Nephreth, he would likely incinerate the pharaoh to keep rival cryptechs from finding a solution that was not his. Ulterior motives, my lord, overlord. Ulterior motives, you say, crowed Oricon. Ask how he acquired it. It's not your time to speak, Sandtick, snarled Trazen. Yes, quite right. But the question stands, said Vox. How did you acquire this? Legitimately, Trazen turned off the orbiculum, packed it in his pocket dimension. If that is all, legitimately how? Vox pressed. It was part of a lot acquisition from the Amunos crown world of Hashtor. Tragic story, Hashtor. A solar flare from the local star triggered a failure cascade in the stasis system. It is a dead world. Legal, under salvage. No one moved. Amunos had been powerful, secretive and distrusted, but their absence would be a blow. The Amunos dynasty, Trazen paused, looking around the room to let the message sink in, will not come to claim it. The council and executioner stood, stunned at the dire pronouncement. Vox murmured at the back of his throat, "That appears to be legal, under salvage." "Ah," goaded Orican, "but when did you acquire it?" He took a step forward, tile strands rattling against his skeletal body. "I have not yielded the floor," said Trazen. "Did you steal the Mysterious before the Amunos died out, or after? Because my auguries, you raided their vault. Because by my auguries, you raided their vault for artifacts well before the solar flare. In fact, immediately when it became clear the solar flare would snuff them out. Your information," Trazen said with a hint of frost, "is incorrect and out of procedure." "Wait," Vox said. "Are you alleging that Overlord Trazen, aware of the solar flare, did not alert the Tomb World's deep spirit and instead raided for artifacts?" "Just so," said Orican. "You heard him say, the Amunos dynasty will not come to claim it. A perfect theft. He walks away with the goods, and the cosmos wipes out the victims. No one can complain." "That is ridiculous," Trazen said. "Villain," crowed Orican. "Plotter. Traitor to your own kind." "Is it true?" demanded Vox. "Keep in mind that my vocal scryers are on high alert. Any lie will be detected." "Well," Trazen uttered in frustration, "understand, there was very little time to make a decision." A groan went up from the council. No, listen," he stumbled. "Awakening a tomb world takes time, at least half a century, even under optimal conditions. To save even the higher orders would have taken more time than was available. So I focused on salvaging what I could from the material culture." "Murderer," snarled Ferric Ossuaria. "It is you who should be on trial, Trazen, not I," sang the diviner. "I foresaw your treachery and—" "Wait," Trazen motioned for quiet. "You foresaw it?" "Of course I foresaw the horror of biotransference, the fall of the Eldari. I've seen the coming of hungry creatures you cannot fathom, and—" "If you foresaw the solar flare," asked Trazen, "why did you not stop it? Did you hope to sweep it afterwards and take the Astrarium without resistance?" "Did you hope to sweep in afterwards and take the Astrarium without resistance?" Orican stared, frozen. His mouth worked, giving the metallic clunk, clunk, cluck. "Ah, you misunderstood me, I think." "Executioner," said Vox. "Take them both." "Bastards," muttered Orican, fingering his ritual tiles. "I knew Vox would be a bad idea." The Amunos dynasty, Trazen paused, looking around the room to let the message sink in, will not come to claim it. The council and executioner stood, stunned at the dire pronouncement. "Sad news," said the adjudicator from her stasis casket. She raised her head, the resurrection orbs that hung from her headdress tinkling like a chandelier. "I assume you are claiming salvage rights?" Trazen breathed a sigh of relief. Or at least the closest he could get to one without lungs. He had worried that Supreme Excellent Lady Yulin was not the right one to conduct this trial. He feared a lighter touch might let Orican run wild, yet he had been relatively subdued. And yet, Trazen felt displaced. A feeling he could not access perturbed him. Reactor coolant sloshed around his innards as if he'd experienced a hard translation. He felt a strange heat by his hip, and noticed the ritual tile which hung there. The one he'd taken from Orican was warm. Odd. Overlord Trazen asked Supreme Excellent Lady Yulin, "Do you wish to claim salvage rights?" "Yes. Yes, indeed I do, Overlord, Supreme Lady Adjudicator." "Are you well, Trazen?" The Supreme Excellent Lady's oculars folded in concern. "If the venerable Trazen is done," cut in Orican, "I have evidence to present." "Please do," nodded Yulin. "Overlord, please sit down. Clearly what you witnessed at Hashtor has affected you deeply. If you have more evidence to present, you may do so after you have recovered." That did not seem like the worst idea, Trazen thought. His head felt clogged. His central reactor cycled at a dangerous rate, and that sense of unreality refused to abate. He locked his legs and took the weight off of his frame. A seat without a chair. "My lady," said Orican. "As you see, Lord Trazen, a dear friend for many centuries, is having difficulties. Biotransference and the Great Sleep have taken its toll on all of us, I fear. This is but a misunderstanding." Trazen stopped, turned his head. "Misunderstanding? Poor Trazen. He invited me to conduct research on Solemnis, you see." Orican opened a dimensional pocket and withdrew the Astrarium Mysterios. "I also have a device. We were comparing them." Trazen's eyes found the device and locked there. His sense of being in two places, his void-sick feeling, stopped as if the Astrarium Mysterious anchored him. Partway through our symposium, he became confused. Poor being. Accused me of stealing his device. Even set his Lich Guard on me. Trazen reached out a hand, bombarded the Astrarium with his spectrometer, received the results. "Of course I had to defend myself." "He transmuted it," roared Trazen. "You've solved the first puzzle." He leapt up from his crouch, bounding towards the device. Orican shrank back, and the executioner reached for Trazen, but he leapt away, opening his projection, adding his spectromantic data. "This composition is exactly the same, see? The exact same." Trazen snarled as the two components reports joined into one, signaling a 100% match. "He's lying to you." All heads turned towards Orican. He tapped a finger on the Astrarium, calculating his next move. "Oh, hell," he said. "The Aminos dynasty," Trazen paused to let the message sink in, "will not come to claim it." The council and executioner stood, stunned at the dire pronouncement. "But that alone does not confirm your salvage rights, does it?" said Overlord Baalbek, his voice resonating inside the stasis casket. He raised his head, the golden sketches of water flowers engraved on his death mark catching the one light. "We cannot simply claim anything we find. It is lawless. And there may be other interested parties." "What?" said Trazen, fighting the void-sick feeling in his internals. The black stone floor rocked like a command barge needing an attitude calibration. He tasted radiation coolant in his mouth. An interstitial alert, overheating on his right hip. Trazen looked down to find Orican's tile glowing white-hot, hissing where it contacted the cold metal of his hip. "If I may, Overlord," said Orican, stepping into the centre. "From my understanding, the Astrarium Mysterious is exempt from the laws of salvage. It is part of the common heritage owned by all Necron kind. Overlord Balbec nodded. As I said, other interested parties. Indeed, Orican continued, Lord Trazen has argued quite convincingly that this tomb should be found. Should it be found, would be not the only a treasure of history, but also a path forward for our kind. Trazen stared at the burning tile. It nagged at him. He had seen it before, images flashing in his mnemonic banks, lighting up his neural cavity with flashes that came and went like sparks from an overloaded power relay. A headdress, power orbs hanging from it like a chandelier, a deep voice of a courtroom orator. He had put an end to his aching cranium. The tile burned through his smoking cord and dropped to the floor. After all, why should the Nihilak control this incredible find? Whoever takes the Astrarium Mysterios should have a chance to seize this once-in-eternity opportunity for power. Trazen felt the illness recede. It was as if the ornament had been pulling him apart, and as it smouldered on the floor, he heard the shouts of assent and excitement from the council members. Partisans, every one of them, thought Trazen. They might claim that they fight for the Necrontyr, for the Infinite Empire, or their own kind, but it was a lie. They wanted power, for their pharaons, for themselves. Oswaria murdered her brother and nephews. Subakar could not feel powerful without conquest. And the meek high metallurgist, Quellac, had betrayed friends on the way to his position. Graspers, all of them. And all of them, the fools, thought they would beat Orican to the tomb. They saw him as an eccentric, half-mad astrologer. But he was so much more dangerous than that. And Balbec, so rabidly loyal to his own dynasty, was the most mercenary. Balbec, whom Trazen had backed as adjudicator simply because Orican had protested so greatly when the council had proposed him, all at once Trazen realized he had been tricked. Orican had wanted that bias, counted on it working in his favour. Very well, Balbec said. The Astrarium Mysterios will be owned by all and none, a free object belonging to he who possesses it. Stealing it shall be no crime, killing for it no sin, and whoever opens the crypt may keep its contents for the greater glory of their dynasty. Orican looked at him, grinning, and in his core, Trazen knew the Chronomancer had bested him. The ritual tiles swinging from his shoulders radiated heat so bright it reflected off his long steel bones, and with his mind clearing, Trazen realized what the Chronomancer had done. So it's war, Diviner, he sent over interstitial message. If you can catch me, Archivist. I liked that. I really liked that. I really liked that chapter. That was really fun. That was really fun, chat. Bit long for a first chapter of the night, I gotta be honest. A little bit long. Bit longer than I thought it would be. A little bit long. But I've noticed that, like, there's no like, average chapter. The chapters are either really long or really short in this book. It's a good read, honestly. I'm really enjoying this. I love the way Robert Rath writes them. I love how different each of the, Necron nobles are. There's so much character in each of them, and it's just really cool. It's lovely to see that soulless robots, automatons, there's so much to each of them. They're so unique. And I love that because it gives a lot of scope for making your own dynasty and doing that kind of thing. Also, hey Machine, hey Honeywyvern, hey Deadfire, hey Leo, hey Andy. Oh my god. Watch streak. Hell yeah. Hey Callus, hey Methol. How is everyone doing tonight? What do you guys like about the book so far? I also have to say, I love you get that kind of like Groundhog Day effect where the Chronomancer is doing all kinds of stuff. Trazen is not the smartest cookie in that specific room for now. None of them are, to be honest. Orican is just brute forcing his way to his perfect outcome. Because that's the only thing he can do. He has the power. I get to rewind time. And he abuses it. He abuses it so much. And it's actually really wonderful. I kind of think Chronomancers are genuinely probably the most terrifying thing that a Cryptek can be now. And it has me very curious. Time hacks are OP. It has me very curious to see what because a Chronomancer is meant to be the Necron antagonist in the new Dawn of War game, I believe. It's not an Overlord or a Pharaon or anyone like that. It's just a Chronomancer, and I'm wondering what the fuck is going on that a Chronomancer is just doing shit. They're on Cyrene, I think, but we're getting a bit off topic. A little bit off topic. Let's see, how long was this chapter? Okay, that was a very long chapter. That chapter was like 30 pages. The next chapter is about 20 pages. Doing these long read-throughs, it's hard on the voice, honestly. But I have fun. Are you guys enjoying it? Is there anything you think I should do better? Is there anything you think I could do better on these to, like, make it more... I feel like I try and put a bit of character into each of the different voices, but I'm not, like, full-on switching to different voices. I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I'd, like... I've not really practiced different voices. But I hope that you're enjoying it. I hope that you're enjoying it so far. Do let me know what you think, guys. Also, if you wondered why I might have been moving a little bit weirdly or interrupted, I had a cat coming up to me. Evie was here. She was like forcing her way into my hands and into my face and was demanding attention while I was trying to read. But I didn't want to like break up my flow. I didn't want to break up my flow. I think a low BGM would be nice to set the mood. I'm not against the idea of having some low background music, but I also kind of think I quite like the whole fireplace crackling low in the background. I could make it louder if it feels too quiet to you. Because I know I had it before and some people said it was too loud. I think that's a little bit better.